Welcome to the Courage Curve, a space for women who are standing at the edge of a shift or already moving through one. I'm Parul. My life has been shaped by steady decisions, inner resilience, and the moments where I had to choose courage long before I had clarity. Each week, I will speak with women who simply didn't arrive at a breakthrough. They built it step by step. From the outside, the transformation can look instantaneous, but together we will uncover the real story, the pressure, the truth-telling, the small choices that create the inflection point that we call the courage curve. Let these conversations stay close to you as you move through your own curve with strength, honesty, and companionship. Welcome back to the Courage Curve. I'm your host, Parul. And every week we sit with women who have faced the edge, and instead of falling apart, they have found a way to fall into themselves. My guest today, Dr. Susan Bernstein, a former management consultant turned executive coach who helps high-achieving women leaders bring their whole selves into how they lead. Her work bridges neuroscience, somatic awareness, and emotional resilience. And what I love most about Susan is that she's lived every word she teaches. She once found herself in the middle of a corporate storm, exhausted, disconnected, and running on autopilot, until her own body finally said no more. Today, we'll talk about what happens when success stops feeling like success, how our bodies try to tell the truth long before we are ready to listen, and what it means to lead with presence instead of pressure. Susan, welcome to the Courage Curve.
Parul, thank you so very much for having me.
I'm so excited to have this conversation with you.
Likewise.
All right, let's start with your early life. Just kind of paint a picture of how it was like for you.
I had a really sweet childhood. My parents were very kind and encouraging. I don't think I knew what I wanted to be when I grew up, except maybe I would have said an author. I loved to write. And I didn't really understand what to do with my interesting set of things I was interested in that were much more internal than external. I mean, I understand it now. I I don't think I've told you this before, but
Yeah.
I did the strangest thing with my kid brother that I now do with everybody. I think I was a coach at probably 8 or 9 years old because I would give my brother these pieces of paper and ask him to do things like draw a representation of something you care about. At me like, "What?" I give him little activities to do. I think I was coaching at an early age, way before the word coach meant what it does today. I was very intellectually curious. My family really fed that in me, including being directed to the encyclopedias all the time if I didn't know something. And then we would talk about things like that. But I was also I think this has really impacted me as an adult. I was very emotionally expressive, but always told that I was either too much or stop feeling that way.
How old were you when you kind of started noticing that pattern where, people always try to correct you?
I don't know if I actually noticed it or did something about it until probably my 20s. I just thought that that's how it was, that there was something wrong or flawed or I think now I look back on it and it was almost as though I wished I had a switch or a lever or a button or a knob that I could adjust how I was feeling, but I would get told, stop feeling whatever, stop being so fill in the blank with something emotional, so upset, so angry, so scared. And so it got me really curious about my own internal world. I would read a lot of psychology type books but they never told me how to they told me I could feel my emotions, but they didn't really tell me how to work with them, and it wasn't until years later when I found somatic psychology or mind-body psychology to like, if I breathe differently, if I change my posture a little bit, if I change where my eyes are looking, I can shift my state. But nobody tells us those things.
That is so interesting. And now it's so mainstream, right? Because in
Mm.
all of these longevity conversations, breathing is the first thing that you have to figure out and get right before you do anything else.
Absolutely. But, nobody was talking about breathing
Yeah.
when I was 5, 6, 8, 12. Nothing. There was no discussion of that. I mean, I think the internet has changed a lot of things where we have the availability, whether you watch a YouTube or a TikTok or something, to talk about these things that wasn't talked about. And when I was going to have to go look in the encyclopedia or go to the library and look something up in the card catalog, find a book on, it just wasn't, the accessibility of information was nowhere near the same. And so I sat feeling for the longest time like I was flawed, didn't have what everybody else had. What I actually realized is it gave me a vocabulary for emotions. And then when I found mind body psychology, I could be like, I've been feeling all these things all this time. Like anger feels, red hot, where sadness feels heavy. I had I had had years of experiencing that
Wow.
I could bring to people, and so it just felt like somebody freed up something in me that had been longing to be understood.
And I'm assuming now with the leaders and the women that you work with, you're able to bring that knowledge and that knowing and becoming so that they can normalize their situation as opposed to feeling like they have to be something else.
That's exactly right. That yeah, I can be like, I mean, one of the things that I'll hear on the regular is, "Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry, I shouldn't feel X, Y, or Z. This is a safe space. Please, all of your feelings are welcome to whatever extent they come out. We're going to use those on purpose. They're signals, they're signs, they're worth paying attention to." But I spent a lot of time feeling like I wasn't supposed to be paying attention to those.
That is so interesting. That is so interesting. Okay, we'll talk a little bit more about that in the later part of the conversation because I want to dig into that and maybe a few examples of how you're able to normalize this for some people. That'll be important for the listeners. I want to go back to your childhood in Phoenix, Arizona, right? That's where you grew up.
Absolutely, yep.
Okay, what was that like? You and I were talking about ranches and horses, and let's paint a picture of sort of how you grew up.
So I grew up in the Phoenix area, for people who know, in Scottsdale, and even more specifically Paradise Valley. But at the time growing up, it was a horse town. It was ranches. And like I remember when there's a place, if people know the Scottsdale area, McCormick Ranch is now a huge master planned community. But I knew it as a working ranch where we would go ride horses and see their real, pet the cattle. So it was a little weird as that whole area started becoming more manicured, more fancy, she. And it was a weird growing up for me in a way. Now that I live on the East Coast, I kind of wish I had lived here or the Bay Area, where I lived for many years, because there's more culture. And I knew even as a kid that I wanted more culture. I felt like where I grew up was, you and I talked about this earlier, I would always get told, Bernstein, you ruined the curve again in school, meaning that I had got 100% or 98% on a test, and the kids, my fellow students, would be envious or really tease me about it
Why
instead of being encouraging.
they tease you about it? It's a great thing that you scored 100. You're setting a high bar. So why do you think that was a challenge?
It wasn't among everybody, I have to say that. There were other smart kids who went to my school, but I think there were plenty of kids who grew up in households where that wasn't the norm, where that wasn't what was valued, something else was valued. And, in my family, that was very, very valued. So I glommed on to other kids who were smart, you know.
And was that a value system just for girls or boys also fell in the same category of not
I probably got teased more by boys for my intellect.
interesting?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if that was in the time blowing gender norms. Like, what are you doing being a smart girl? I remember a girl who I went to school with who in high school, she was, I mean, just whip smart at math. And She was also absolutely gorgeous. I mean, she could have been in the Miss Arizona pageant. And she was so misunderstood because that wasn't a combination that people knew what to do with. Like, I can't, they couldn't, the boys couldn't make fun of her in the same way for her intellect because they're like, wow, she's a hot girl. So it was this strange, I mean, I felt really, especially high school, I felt I couldn't have gotten through high school without a few really good friends, nor without teachers who would take me under their wing and be like, not exactly this, but like, it's okay to be smart. And we're going to help encourage that in you.
That's really, really important, having the right teachers and right influence. We talked about this incident in your life where you decided to go to Oxford. What was that like? Let's talk about that.
When I was in college, I went to University of Arizona in Tucson. So it was about a 2-hour drive from my family. It's close enough, but good enough space to find my own way.
Yeah.
Um, And one of my friends came running up, David, and he's like, I just got a scholarship. He came running up. He's like, I'm going to Oxford next year. I'm like, wait, what? And I
Okay.
don't know what came over me, but I blurted out, well, I'm going to get one of those scholarships too. And Susan, it's already closed for this year, but I delved into it and found out how to apply for a Rotary scholarship. And I was super, super lucky because
Mm.
I was selected to go to for a Rotary year abroad.
Wow.
And in my case, I chose to go to Hong Kong. And I was fortunate for Hong Kong, it was still an English speaking British colony. So I
Hmm.
didn't need to know Chinese before I went there. And I got to learn both survival Cantonese and I took Mandarin lessons of all things in Hong Kong at Chinese University of Hong Kong, where I also got to teach students English, and I worked for the Institute for International Education, helping Hong Kong and mainland Chinese students to get to apply for colleges here in the US.
How did it feel moving from Arizona and maybe like a sheltered life and
Yes.
to Hong Kong, a big city by yourself?
It was for sure life changing. It was like I woke up.
Mm.
First of all, I mean, I think I had already always known I wanted more culture. I remember my dad had this opportunity to move to LA and he didn't take it. And I was pissed. My mom wasn't pissed. My brother wasn't pissed. Dad wasn't pissed. I was pissed.
Right.
So I knew LA had more culture. Okay, didn't I was in high school. I didn't get to decide. But I get to Hong Kong and of course you have people from all over the world in Hong Kong. And so, it's a crowded place full of cultural things to do and we could go across the border into China. And because they were two separate countries at the time, it was pre 1997. And I I just felt like a kid in a candy store. There was so much to do there. I'd take a flight to Taiwan. I found out that I had a friend of a friend living in Taipei. So I went to Taipei, went to Singapore, I went to Thailand. It felt like there was just so much new to see. It absolutely brought out the adventurer in me that I didn't know was there. I mean, I think I had an inkling of it, but I don't think my family knew how to encourage that in me. It's not that my dad moved from the UK to the US and really, he's a pull yourself up by your bootstraps story. But I don't think my parents knew how to encourage my own form of how I wanted to travel and adventure. I look at my parents when they travel, it was always like on an organized tour. I'm like, no, I want a backpack on my back and I want to live as close to how the locals live as I possibly can. I just had this need to, I don't know what to say, but to get gritty. I never wanted to stay in a Western style hotel because that's not going to give me the feeling and the flavor of this place. Like, I just wanted to immerse.
And what did that teach you? What did it add to your life?
A lot of things. I mean, one for sure in Hong Kong was what it's like to be the minority. I had gone to a high school with 2,000 people and we had I think one black kid, a handful of Hispanic kids, and that's
Mhm.
weird for Arizona, and a few Asian kids. And even then, I knew something wasn't right about that.
Mm.
Being in Hong Kong uh, really humbled me about being Caucasian. I'm like, I'm the minority here, and I get to see and feel what that's like. But I remember one week that
Mm.
I went to all these. There was this, I don't know if it was a world dance week or month or something, but I went to dance performances from Thailand, Israel, and I'm forgetting some of the other countries all in one week. And I was just so delighted to get a sense of what those cultures are like from being able to see that. That's probably an early precursor of me waking up to that, like, dance is such an amazing expression of culture, of what's going on inside, make what take what's inside and manifest it outwardly so others can see. I felt so alive, and it was also being in Hong Kong. So I wound up I wound up in the midst of a world event in a way that I wasn't expecting.
Sure.
I crossed the border in late May of 1989
Mhm.
with a friend. And so I had been working for the Institute for International Education, and my boss, Glenn, said to me, I want you to open a Beijing office for us. I'm like, oh my God, I'm so young. Are you sure I can do that? He's like, I really want you to do that. He said, you know what? I want you to take your May break and I
Mm.
want you to go to Beijing and go scope it out. I'm like,
Right.
look, I've already been to Beijing. I know I've only gone once. It was only for like a week and a half, but yeah, I know I can live there. So wasn't listening to him about what to do with my own break and my own money. But I had mentioned to my parents that that's where I thought I was going. And I would check in with my family like every 2 weeks and make, in those days, a collect call home to the US and talk for a few minutes and just let them know I was okay and some quick updates. So I go with a friend and we take a train from Hong Kong to Xiamen, in Fujian province, the capital of Fujian province. So it's like two provinces above Hong Kong on the eastern seaboard of China in the south. I didn't realize until I called home one day, uh, and my kid brother answers the phone and he's like, "Oh my God, I love you." I'm like, "I love you too." Why are you telling me this? And he's like, "Mom and dad have been glued to the TV for 24 hours, so I sent them to the movies." I'm like, Why are mom and dad watching TV
Yeah.
for 24 hours? What's wrong?" And he goes, "You don't know what's happening in China?" And I'm like, "What's happening in China?" He said, "There are tanks in Tiananmen Square."
Oh my
I'm like, I honestly think I said something like water tanks. He's like, no, military tanks. I'm like, what are they doing there? Because when I had left Hong Kong with my friend, students had control of Tiananmen Square, but
Right.
obviously that changed. And so it took me 3 days to get out of China. It put me in this sense of realizing, my God, this is a major world event. And I really didn't understand it until I got back to Hong Kong and could see, the Hong Kong was showing videos of what had happened. And I just sat there with a friend watching that and sobbing,
Yeah.
uncontrollably sobbing, feeling, and I not knowing if I could ever go back to China, not knowing what their government was going to do. And my friends in the South were worried, like, we don't know if we'll ever see you again because the government could impose martial law here in the South too.
What did that make you feel? Why were you sobbing when you watched the news?
I mean, at first I was just devastated for the students.
Right.
I was really, really proud of them. So pro democracy. Of course, coming from the US, I understood what that meant for them to fight for that. And then also to see, it was so shocking to me to see a government turn military equipment on its own people.
How did you get out of Beijing at the time?
Oh, so I wasn't in Beijing, I was in the South. I was supposed to be in Beijing. That was what was shocking for my family, and that's why they were watching the TV because they thought I had told them that's where I was going, and I didn't update them. I didn't think about it. I didn't think, "Oh, yeah, by the way, while you're traveling, there's gonna be, serious problem in Beijing." My poor parents thought, they wound up so a local TV news crew to my parents' house because I had worked for a US congressman, and I don't know, the news asked the congressman, "Do you have any constituents in China?" He said, "Actually, I have a former staffer there."
Wow.
He called my parents and they got interviewed on the local news. It was in that it was in that time that they realized, "Oh my god, we need to get in touch with our daughter." My mom was gonna get on an airplane and fly to China and look for me. I guess it was fortunate that I called home.
And it was also fortunate you chose not to listen to your boss and go to the south of China to spend your vacation as opposed to in Beijing. Otherwise, getting out of Beijing would have been much.
Yeah, I mean, but getting out was an issue. I mean, first of all, the transit in China now is ridiculously good. They're like, world leaders in ease of transit. It wasn't at the time. Like I remember getting train tickets. So there were these tiny little pieces, shreds of paper. They're like, you have to hold on to this. And they were like rice paper thin. Um, but even getting that and getting to a line, there were lots of people wanting to be mobile then.
Right.
So, and Xiamen at the time was not the easiest city to get out of. I mean, it took the train getting there from Hong Kong was 24 hours. I actually wound up getting a flight home because we went to the train station and they were just looking at me like no tickets, no tickets. I did get a flight home which was, as a student pretty pricey, but I'm like, I got to get out of here for my own security."
Oh my goodness. What an experience.
Made me very, very aware of world events. And I think ever since then, I've been a news junkie, pay attention to world events and what's going on as best I can. I can't keep touch of everything, but it got me really interested in world politics. And it really, it matured me in a way that I probably didn't realize for a number of years.
That's so I mean that is life-changing experience that you had in the way that you had it and also a lot of protection at the same time. So then what happened? Did you choose to come back to the US and pursue a different career? What happened after that?
I had really wished that I could have had that job in Beijing, but the US Department of Education broke ties with the Chinese Ministry of Education. And so there was no diplomatic way to have that job. So I looked into Taiwan and the US doesn't really have full diplomatic ties with Taiwan. I mean, I could have taught English there. I actually interviewed for a job of all places with Acer. Sometimes wonder what would have happened to me if
Yeah.
I had been a really early Acer employee, but that wasn't to be. I came back to the US and wound up working for a professor, someone who had been one of my professors at University of Arizona, doing at a time management training company. Nobody
Mm.
really teaches that as a whole thing, but we got bought out later by Franklin Covey, and they we taught time management and project management workshops. That's what I started off doing, and then being a product manager for them. And then my boss said something to me one day that I thought was compassionate. I thought she was being really strategic for me. She said,
Mhm.
you're not going to get anywhere in this role at this company if you don't either get an MBA, or you're not going to have anything happen in your business career unless you get an MBA or a JD. So I took the LSAT for law school and didn't do well on that took test. I took the GMAT and did really well and applied to business school at both Stanford and Berkeley.
So you got an MBA and then you chose to work in management consulting.
Correct. I had done this really interesting project. We had something at Berkeley called the International Business Development Program, and I helped a that was a company in New Jersey who was helping a business was working with a company in Indonesia to source their products,
Mm.
their industrial products. And I did it with a team, and I had that on my resume and working for Intel that summer as well. Um, Essentially doing research to figure out how to make their sales teams more effective. And I guess management consulting loved that. Those are the kinds of, projects that they could see me doing for them. So I got courted by all the major management consulting firms and wound up at Accenture. And I couldn't have had a worse case of imposter syndrome. Who am I to be doing this stuff? I don't think people, it wasn't something, again, it wasn't something people talked about then, imposter syndrome. I mean, I think that the term wasn't coined for, I don't know, until maybe right when I started working at Accenture, that term got coined. I actually wound up finding out about it when I started my PhD and studying psychology and being, that's what was going on in that experience.
Wait, you clearly were a high achiever. So it just seems to me that you set your mind on something and then you go get it. Does that sound right to you as well? Because that's what I'm seeing the pattern. You decided to do something, break the norm. You were always like a high performer in school. You decided to go explore culture. You just figured it out.
Yeah, it's funny. I have a girlfriend in my life right now who thank you, Marie, for saying, Susan, you're feisty. And yeah, I realized my whole life I've had a feistiness.
Hmm.
I wouldn't have said that early on. I didn't know how to own it in myself. I do now. And if there's something that I want, I'm like, I may not know I'm going to get it, but I'm going to get something like it that I will have a dogged determinism,
Mm-hmm.
and a what's the word, like an enthusiasm for something, like a zest. Yes, a can-do attitude. And for me now, I know it's there, that I'm not just giving myself a head trip about I can do it. It's a felt sense. I get a certain warmth in my chest and a tingling in my arms that's like, "Yep, okay. Signature, yes, go."
That's amazing. Would you call it feistiness or will you call it courage? Because the way I see this, like a courage or having courage is a decision. And a decision we have to make many times over to then get to the other point, which is, a massive breakthrough and the building blocks that lead to something big. And that's what I see repeating in your life as well.
Thank you. To me, they go hand in hand, and I think I fuel my courage with feistiness.
Mm,
I think it's a fuel for feistiness. Feistiness is a fuel for courage with me. It's a feeling like, I think you used the word breakthrough,
mm,
right? You want to break through something. If you're to break through anything, you need some energy, right?
right.
You can't just like, I think I'll break through,
Yeah,
instead with like
propulsion. Yeah.
shoulders slumping, and
Yes.
um you have to, it's a felt sense.
Yes.
It's something you can, it's palpable in your body,
Mm,
or at least for me it is. And so it's, I have to get almost like, if I'm not feeling it, I'm like, let me see if this is worth getting riled up about,
mm.
but riled up in a good way of like, I just need to gather this energy. And sometimes it's like a growling bear. I won't growl it. I don't think I growl at anybody, but my friends can hear when it changes in my voice. Like, the dogged determinism of like, it's actually like, make me mad about this or help me get mad about this, because that anger has a spark in it. And I don't mean like get mad at somebody, like let me get
No, I know what you're saying.
heated up about this.
Some people would go out of their way to tell you that you can't do something, and then, even though that's true for me as well. I'm like, yeah, I can. I mean, I didn't want to do it, but now
Yeah.
I will do it just
Yeah, I won't go after something that I don't want just because somebody tells me that I can't. So I won't waste my energy on that. But
yeah,
if it's something that I want and someone tells me I can't do it, that's even more fuel. Like, oh, you
exactly.
just watch me.
Exactly, exactly. Awesome. And then you get this amazing management consulting career. And I'm assuming you wanted to do really, really well, given, knowing sort of you are a high achiever and you wanted to do really well for yourself. So, what was that experience and what was that time period like?
I made a big choice early on. I got staffed in retail, and as much as I love them, I didn't want to help like Gap decide where to put the cash register in their locations. So I got asked to switch to healthcare consulting because it had more meaning for me. And I really enjoyed the projects that I did because uh, if I couldn't stick around long enough to see the implementation of our strategies, because I was in the strategy practice, I at least knew that I could watch what was going to happen. And then, do you want me to get into this story about what changed?
Yes,
So,
if early promotion isn't done, then it's too late. I do want to talk
yes.
about that. Yes.
Yes. So I was up for promotion from senior consultant to manager. In my mind, I was getting a late promotion. I was pissed off because I didn't get early promotion.
Right.
So if I'm not early, then I must be late.
Exactly.
I was pissed and I'm like, I'm going to get this and I'm not going to let anything hold me back.
Right.
And despite my imposter syndrome and feeling like I don't know if I really know what I'm doing on all these projects. And now I realize, hindsight's 2020 vision. I realize nobody knows what they're doing. You make stuff up as you go. But I was so overcome with this feisty, pissed off feeling of I have to get promoted that I wasn't going to let anybody see any weakness in me. And that plan got blown up when I was driving home. I would fly out of town Monday to Thursday to a client site and then fly back on Thursday night and Friday in the San Francisco office. One particular Thursday, I was driving back home from the airport and I got rear ended by a drunk driver.
Mm.
And I was fortunate that the accident was rather minor, at least to my car. The back quarter panel was smashed in, but I felt kind of out of sorts. And I drive home
Mm.
and I show up the next morning in the San Francisco office. And the partner in charge of my project looks at me and she goes, "You don't look so good." And
Mm.
I look at her, I'm like, "Am I having a bad hair day?" She goes, "No, you look like you got hit by a car." But I did. Joanna had this insight that I didn't know she was having. And she encouraged me to go to the doctor, which I did. I had a great relationship with my doctor and I was fortunate to get in the same day. But I was sort of like stumbling around a bit and like lightheaded, feeling dizzy. And my doctor's like, "Look, I'd really like to run an MRI." Absolutely not. No, no. It would have been good to do that. I found out later that I had a pinched nerve and that was causing all kinds of problems. But I was like, nope, I'm hell bent on not showing I'm weak. I'm like 6, 8 weeks away from promotion cycle. I'm not messing this up.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to be out for any reason. So for another 2 weeks, I'm on this project, and those 2 weeks were both 100-hour work weeks, which doesn't allow a lot of time for anything. And they're out of town. I'm eating hotel and vending machine food. And I have this big presentation to make to the C suite of a major healthcare company. And I have no idea, how I'm going to do it.
Right.
So right before it, I go for lunch and I get a chimichanga, this big deep fried burrito. Lot of food for a very petite person, but I wanted it because I'm like, I've got to feel, like heavy because I
Mm.
feel so lightheaded. Maybe this will work. And I stumble from the parking lot back to the office. I grab my laptop and I go up to the top floor of this building and I go to show this presentation on my recommendations. And I show the first slide. And to this day, I have no idea what happened between that and waking up on the floor
My
face
God.
up. Yeah, with the whole C-suite standing over me and my project team, and I had collapsed from just
Oh.
sheer exhaustion, and I was really lucky. My doctor gave me 5 weeks off, 4 weeks off, a month off, anyway, a month medical leave, and, it was honestly in that moment of waking up on the floor, I'm like, "I clearly don't pay attention to myself."
Mm.
Like, not really. I listen to my head, but not my body. Everything going on in my body. It was like, "No, no, you need to not be talking now, body." And I started realizing that could be pretty dangerous. Like, this probably isn't a good thing. Yeah, it was definitely a huge, huge wake-up call for me that got me, exploring mind-body techniques, mind-body anything, because I saw that my mind and body were not in unison at all.
It's almost unfortunate that the work culture has made it almost attractive to be that strong.
Yes.
You can push through anything for work.
Oh, 100%. And it's all that effort of pushing. I mean, I think about all the effort it takes to push. Doesn't really allow anything to evolve naturally or be evoked. It it it's I mean, I think about it, it's very rigid to do that. It's full rigidity, and if there's anything we have in our feminine power, I mean, there's many, many things, but one of them is the flowy, responsive, allowing, listening, responding that comes with so for so many of us is our feminine energy.
Yes, and just being connected to our environment is kind of what you're talking about. The interconnectivity, not just for mind body, but also our environment. And it's just amazing how these connections are actively severed.
100%. I mean, earlier in my career in consulting,
Mhm.
where I was actually told not to listen to those things. I mean, now we would call this reading the room. I was essentially told, don't read the room. Like, wait, how do I turn? I turned this off, this ability to listen for at least 5 years in management consult. The 5 years I was in management consulting, because I thought, oh, no, no, I can't. I can't do this. I have to be intellectual only, and my body, yeah, no, I'm not listening to signs or signals there, which is I mean, one, it's cutting off a huge volume of information that comes to us. I mean, we know from science now that we don't just get information from our brain. Our whole
Yes.
body has receptors for emotion, for gauging what's going on in an environment. For sure, our ancestors, if you told our ancestors 1,000 years ago, yeah, just turn that off. It's dangerous. No.
I mean, it's always interesting to me. We're people are encouraged to be their whole self outside of work, but then the moment you are at work, which is now 24 by 7, by many accounts, you are expected to be in a box.
You're just reminding me, one of my classmates in somatic psychology uh, passed me a note one day in class because I had said that I wanted to take whatever I was doing in this. I thought I was going to become a psychotherapist. That didn't happen. But I said I wanted to do my work in the corporate world. And she slips me this note and she writes, corporate equals corporeal, which means to be in the body. When were you in the body in the corporate world? And it just like stopped me in my tracks, like, whoa. Well, yeah, I guess that's one of my to dos is to help the business world understand that we actually need this.
Yeah.
It's not that we should drop structure altogether. We need a healthy blend, and it's unhealthy when we're like, okay, you can bring in 0% of that part of you.
Yes. I completely agree with that. Completely agree. I think there is more work that is needed in the corporate environments and world to allow for creativity, to allow for people to be people, but at the same time, like do really great work. I think everything is possible. All of that being done together is possible.
We're able to be encouraged in who we are and not, like if my parents had known, oh, you're feeling a lot of feelings right now, instead of stop feeling that way, which to me is the rigidifying. Don't do that. It would be to
Because
be curious. What's going on for you right now?
exactly, because then you're spending your entire energy trying to be the anti person that you are, as opposed to, kind of leaning into that energy a little bit more and become the best version of yourself and allowing yourself to just be.
I
Um,
like the phrase you said. It's not a comfortable one, but the anti-person that you are, like, woof. But it's right. It hits, it lands. I
yes.
don't want to be that, but that is what it can feel like. No, don't be you. Ouch.
I feel like we women tend to do that a little bit more. At least from my experience, I felt like I was such a goody two shoes student, even in my work environment. So when I was working, if I was given a feedback, I would take it so seriously that I would put everything I've got into that feedback to become better or do it that way as I was told, until I realized that it's also very qualitative. So people providing feedback are also biased. So I should not listen to everything. But I see a lot of the people that I mentor now, a lot of women are so serious about feedback, while, I look at men and they just would ignore feedback and move on and just be themselves. And here I was trying to apply every feedback, which I was exhausted at the end of it. Do you think we women tend to do that to ourselves?
I do. And I think there's a level that's been modeled in many ways of women accommodating. I'll take care of you. I'll do that thing that you need me to do without stopping and saying, actually, these ways that you want me to be that are stifling my greatest gifts are not working. This is not a good idea. And this whole fundamental belief that women and the empathy that most of us naturally have and that ability to read the cycles excuse me, read the signs in ourselves and the signs from others is pretty innate. I mean, think about we women, from a certain age in our early teens through, I don't know, late 40s, early 50s in general, we cycle. Our
Mm,
bodies are changing every single month, and we're
right,
having to pay attention to that. I
right.
don't know, I don't know enough about men in any kind of cycling, but they certainly don't have to stop and be like, wow, right now I'm in pain and I need to get through this meeting. So that gives us this ability to dial in with, I'm actually feeling something and I need to pay attention to it.
Yes.
What's going on with me? And that I think that's a really important trait that we women have of that inner listening. But in the corporate world, it can get trained out of us.
Yes. Yes. And I have seen that personally for me. And for me, I didn't realize it until it was, I would say, a little bit too late, but not so much that I can't come back from that. But let's go back to your life. So you did well in management consulting. You had a wake up call. What did you do with that wake up call? How did that change your life?
Oh, in a lot of ways. But I think the biggest was that I knew I needed to eventually get out. So I changed my job first from serving clients to being internal and running our global training operations for strategy. Uh, and then running a particular program for the firm that was very strategic training. I won't get into all the details of that because it's not that important. It's not that important to the bigger story. But I realized how much I was just absolutely in love with learning and how people learn and making learning experiential and really applied to the job. And it was the .com era, and so I decided to leave Accenture at what was then, well, I guess was Anderson Consulting, but I left and joined a startup that was in the online learning space.
Mhm.
I absolutely loved it. Even to this day, what we were doing at this company, Pensare, who does the Italian word for to think, which doesn't exist anymore. Unfortunately, we didn't make it, but we were doing so much advanced work, really. We were taking tools and frameworks from major MBA programs and selling that, like creating those into learning modules that were really tailored to clients and their specific situations. I loved the getting to work with all the different professors, and I really, really loved serving those clients and helping design what they needed,
Right.
and making ensuring that what we were creating, like if it was marketing plans, then it was like, it's not just here's how to do marketing. It's let's build a marketing plan that's for your company. And this was like early 2000s, before the internet, definitely before AI. Maybe AI was an idea then, but you could not like implement AI at least in a generative way. So we were really ahead of our time, and I absolutely loved that.
Mm.
Um, but my life changed. Do you want me to tell this?
Yes.
Yeah. So
Your life changed.
so it was huge. If I'd known this period was coming, I would have hidden under a rock. But I was married at the time, and I now know I was married to the wrong person for me. But it was Valentine's Day 2001. We had a morning therapy appointment. We went to see the therapist, and I blurted out, I want a divorce.
Wow.
And my now ex said to me on the car ride home before we both went off to work, "Thanks a lot for doing that on Valentine's Day." I'm
Yeah.
like, "Is it Valentine's Day?" I was just so disoriented in our marriage that I just couldn't pay any attention. So 3 days later, he's like, "You have to get out of here." And I'm like, "Fine." I did not feel safe in my own house. So I moved 3 days later. And then 2 days after that, I got a phone call from my mom that my dad was in the hospital. We had originally thought he had a stroke, but he had a traumatic brain injury. And I flew home to Arizona immediately. And when I saw my dad in the hospital, I passed out in the hospital. Not even, I was just that, it was just so, so much had happened in such a short period. And then I flew back to California to have a surgery. Then I flew back again the next week to be with my mom, who was absolutely freaking out with my dad, he was finally conscious, but he didn't he wasn't oriented, so he didn't know where he was, and sometimes he didn't know who he was. He was healing, but my mom was, of course, freaking out, like, am I going to get my husband back?
Mm,
He's not one. My mom is strong
mm,
New Yorker, and, so I was helping, and thank God I had a healthcare consulting background and, just like, "Okay, I'm calling a care conference." And, like, I'm getting all the doctors together in the same room. We are not treating dad like systems.
right.
And so we got that under control. Then my brother flew out to be with my dad so my mom could fly back with me to California to have a second surgery.
Mm.
That happened on a Monday, and on a Tuesday, I get a phone call from my boss at this startup, and she said, "This is my last official act as your boss. You've been laid off. You have severance till Friday."
My goodness.
And so in 5 weeks, I lost my marriage, my home, almost lost my dad, lost a good deal of health and well-being, and lost my job. But yes, if I had known it was coming, as I said, I would have hidden under a rock. Just hide away, don't let it happen. But in a way, it showed me my own strength. All of those things happening, being like, "Wait, I'm okay, I survived this onslaught of things." And in a way, it freed me up. Didn't I was like, "Wait, if I reinvent myself here, I do not have to go back to." Well, startups were on the decline anyway. The dot
Right.
com bomb was underway. And that's why we disappeared as a company. This was towards the end of the dot com era.
How
I
old were
wanna
you at the time when you had to go through so much?
I was early 30s, 33, 34. Um, and, in a weird way, I felt an immense amount of freedom.
Mm,
I I mean, and that's really strange to say, to be like, you had all this bad stuff happen, but it freed me up from who I thought I had to be. I have to be a management consultant. I have to have a prestigious job. I have to do all these things. And so I journaled one day, and I had this journaling between my head and my heart. And my heart basically said to my head, "You win all the time. You always decide what we're doing. I'm tired of that. I want to study psychology, head. This is what I feel.
yeah.
So I want you to be in my service. So you figure out how to make it happen." And so I started looking at psychology programs. The traditional ones didn't get me. And I was at a friend's house, and he had this book, Molecules of Emotion by Candace Pert, on it. And I'm like, wait, science and emotion? I devoured the book. And that's where I learned about mind body psychology. So I wound up at the one school that offered a PhD in it because I'm like, I'm going all the way. And I I was like, I'm gonna go to this program, and I realized this school was once a month for a long weekend, so I
Mm,
could work.
mm,
And I walked into the career center at Berkeley Haas, where I'd done my MBA, and bumped into the career center director in the most great synchronistic way and said the most naive thing to her. Hey, Abby, is there any work I can do here? That's like a high school question. Not a I've finished grad school and worked for a bunch of years kind of question.
Right.
But she said, yeah, actually, can you help? You're ex management consultant. We need people who can do case study practices with students wanting jobs in management consulting. And so that's
Mm.
what I started doing. Then was resumes and interviews and all of that. And so that was paying the bills while I was going to school. Uh, and I think I've just really learned to follow what's going on and to trust. Not always easy, but I wound up in my clinical internship at an elementary school, which I screamed and yelled and was like, I don't want to be in an elementary school.
Mm.
And thank God my clinical supervisor said to me, I know you want to work with adults one day, but where do you think pathologies start? This will be wonderful for you to see this. And it was. And I also wound up working with suicidal 9-year-old girl. I remember when we were doing play therapy and she drew a cartoon and she drew this character and over the character's head is I want to kill myself. And I'm like, who's that? She's like, that's me. And I'm like,
Oh
wait,
my God.
it took my breath away in a worst way, and I'm like, "Okay, remember the suicide protocol. See if you can remember the suicide protocol." And I wanted to rescue this kid. I wanted to take her home and shelter her, but of course I couldn't do that. And I remember going to a guy I was dating at the time and going to the parking lot of his office, like, come meet me out here. And I just like needed to sob and be held in somebody's arms. I'm like, I'm so worried for this girl. And I started realizing and talking to my clinical supervisor, I can't do this work. Do not want this responsibility. So to this day, I'm super grateful to people who are therapists because
Mm.
they are often holding life and death in their hands. But I had built this following when I was at Berkeley because I would do these unusual things with students. I'd ask, would you be a guinea pig for me to try something out from my mind body psychology class and apply it to your situation? So like the students would be like, I can't decide. Susan, can you help me? I can't decide between should I take an offer at BCG or McKinsey. They both made me offers. And
Mm.
I'd be like, all right. So imagine that you're holding one in one hand, one offer in one hand and one in the other, and you choose the hands. And they're like, okay. And I'm like, now tell me what you feel in each hand. Inevitably, they'd come to an answer. I would do things like that with people, or like a student who came to me super nervous. He sweated in his interview practice. Like I could just see the beads of sweat all over his face. I'm like, this is just practice. This isn't, I don't have a real job to offer you. Um, but I'm like, let's do some breathing together and let's have you talk from your belly. He's like, what does it mean to talk from your belly? I said, instead of the answer coming from your head, imagine that you can bring all the force of who you are from your belly area. And he had to play with it for a few times, but he found his confidence there
Mm.
in literally holding his center. And this guy who'd gone from like nobody wanted to talk to him because he'd blow interviews in the first 5 minutes to
Mm.
having 7 job offers.
Wow.
So
Amazing.
there is it really made me realize there's something to this mind-body connection
Mm.
that is worth bringing to business. And it was actually an executive MBA student who came to me and said, "Susan, I cannot get myself." He had the most stellar resume, like all brand name companies on his resume, top of his class, brilliant. And he's like, I don't like the job there, but I cannot get myself to really put myself out there and go somewhere else. And we talked and talked about it. I said, you know what? Would you do something different? And I had this tiny little room that I worked in,
Mm.
itty bitty interview room. Like, would you come over to my house? And so I had him over to where I was living at the time in my living room. Like, this was just experimental, but I'm like, show me with your body what it feels like to be stuck. He literally put himself against the wall. And he's like, it feels like this. And I, great. From there, let yourself feel what it would be like to move a little bit. So he starts taking a step forward. I mean, it takes him a while, but he takes a step forward like he's moving in molasses and
Mm.
slow, lumbering. And then I'm like, great, let this impulse build. What does it
Right.
want to do next? So then he starts like gliding and his shoulders are moving side to side and he starts moving in circles and he's got his eyes closed this whole time. And a big open, wide open space where I was. And he's moving in faster and faster circles, and he moves his eyes and moves in fast circles. He goes, God, my wife would love to see me. This is like dancing. I said, "Wait, let yourself dance."
Yeah.
And then he does this for a bit, and then he stops in his tracks, and his eyes are all big, and he looks at me, and it's like, Susan, I got it. And I'm thinking, I have no idea what you got, but okay.
What
And
did you get?
he looked at me and he said, Susan, I thought my security was there, and he points to the wall where he had started, and he goes, "My security was in my company and the big brand name that they are holding me up. But in moving, I realized all these skills, all these talents, all this ability is in me." He said, "A year of therapy would not have got me this insight
Yeah.
that I'm powerful in my own right, separate from my company, and I don't need to stay attached to this brand name." He had a new job within 3 months, and a killer job at that.
My goodness. Okay. This is so interesting. And I'm going to ask you a question that might help anyone listening to this episode. So, you then kind of had this breakthrough where you decided to be a very different kind of coach. And clearly, you started helping people early on. Fast forward a little bit. Now you teach somatic leadership, which is the body carries intelligence. So, for someone who has spent years living in their head, what is the first step for them to reconnect? What are these common messages that our bodies send that we tend to ignore? And what have you seen happen when we finally pay attention? And you're welcome to use any examples that you can share with for the leaders that you worked with that might be helpful.
Yeah.
Just curious, like how does that work and how do people
Well,
start?
first, I want to just say I never ever tell somebody you're living in your head,
Okay.
or tell them to get in their body.
Okay.
It's always a back and it's almost like a dance back and forth. But one of the things that I'll notice is how someone's holding their head or not moving or
Mm.
really stationary, and I'll ask them, "Can I invite you to bring some attention to your shoulders or your head or your face or whatever, and just notice what's going on there?" And sometimes they'll roll their eyes, and I get it. I've been there too. Like, wait, why are we doing this? But often that invitation is a way in. Sometimes they'll say to me, "Hey, I hear you work with people in the body, but I don't even know what I'm feeling." And like, so how do you know you're hungry? How do you know you're thirsty? How do you know you have to go to the bathroom? Those are all felt senses. So your body is sending you signals. It's not that you don't listen to them at all. It's that you haven't gone deeper with that, right? Haven't allowed that your body is telling you things. Now, it's not like ChatGPT. Hey, ChatGPT, I have this question, and then your body's going to tell you all about 15 different ways to market a product. It doesn't work in a linear way like that, of course. But especially when it comes to our own lives and our own decisions, it's like how do we make that decision? Sometimes I ask somebody, how did you know that your spouse or your partner was the right person for you? Or how did you know somebody wasn't right for you? Right. So it's not that we don't listen at all. It's that we haven't tuned that listening. So that's one thing that we do. And then another is often I'm the only weirdo who watches this. Or maybe there are others, but there's not a lot of us who watch people's breathing. And so I'll say, hey, somebody visibly, and we'll describe something about being uptight or anxious. And what do you notice is going on with your breathing right now? Oh, I should breathe more. I'm like, okay, okay. We're evaluating that. Where can you feel your breath? What's the quality of it like? And then there's usually an aha or an insight. So I'm not starting with some big, like, let's have a paradigm and let's look at,
Mm.
these 15 different dimensions. It's really about helping somebody in a way, converse with themselves in a way that they used to when they were really little kids. We don't know the world verbally when we're newborns. Okay? Or 0 to 3. We don't interact. We don't know in that way, but we have incredible knowing from movement. And so sometimes I'll invite somebody to like, what happens if you just let your shoulders move just a little bit now? What do you notice? Like I hear a sigh, like somebody's been holding on to something. And it's not that all the work that I do is all like, let's just listen to your body today. I'm still bringing in strategy and I'm still bringing in tools and things like that.
Let's talk about that a little bit more because I do think there is something that maybe people can start using right away. Are you able to share any examples of any leaders that you may have helped with your entire tool set and what was the outcome? Of course, without getting into any confidential details.
I can't say anybody's ever used the entire tool set because it's huge. But for sure, I've definitely had leaders say to me, learning to become more attuned to myself. So, one of the simple tools that I give people is an acronym SET,
Hmm.
and it stands for sensations, emotions, thoughts.
Hmm.
We tend to go the other way around. We buy into our thoughts
Hmm.
and they make us feel a certain set of emotions, and then we'll feel sensations from that. I'm inviting people to do the opposite, to start with what am I, what sensations or what do I sense in my body right now? And if
Okay.
I sit with that for a bit, what emotions does that bring up? And then what thoughts does that bring up? But it's the bringing in the new practice of noticing sensation
Hmm.
before thought so that we're changing the dynamic of my thoughts always win like mine used to. I just have to buy into my head and be like, actually there ought to be a dialogue here. So I'm not asking this that you only listen to your sensations. Oh my God, you never leave your bed in the morning. Right? It's cozy and warm in here, not going anywhere. So I am not fostering that in people, but incorporating that sensory awareness into our day can help us to to me it's so important in how we regulate, especially in a world that is we are constantly bombarded. We're bombarded with information, like the phone is ringing and it's buzzing and there's a Slack and there's 50,000 emails and and
Right.
Sometimes I'm like, okay, what sensation are you feeling? Wow, my breath is really held. Okay,
Mm.
great. Can you take one long, slow, deep breath and like at least be present to, wow, there's a lot going on right now. And some of the leaders that I work with start taking these tools into their teams. So it might be let's just stop for 1 minute before we start this meeting. Let's each have a one word check in with how we're doing in our body. Or let's take a minute of breathing long, slow, and deep before we move on.
Mm.
And so it's little practices. And those can certainly add up. Um, but I'm thinking about a leader who said to me, I do this in my meetings and especially with people who had been previously stressing me out. And if I pay attention to my breath, I realize I'm controlling my breath right now. They're not. But also that they took this practice home to their kids, and this particular leader taught it to her 3 boys. Like, let's just notice our breathing. And she loves the breathing techniques and uses them. Um, I think there's a lot of different ways. There's not any like
Mm.
one tool. I'm much bigger about let's have a big toolkit and pull out what we need. Like I don't want to give here, everybody have a hammer. Okay. Hammer may I don't have any nails, so I don't need any hammer or anything.
Right.
What I need is a screwdriver. Or I need a chisel or whatever. Yeah, but I'm trying to think of some other good examples. I think about, one leader who I was working with who had to make a big decision about whether or not to change up her job. And what really gave her courage was a daily practice of feeling her feet on the ground and taking a stance that was powerful for her, like, and standing in her power and imagining herself in a new world of a new role. And she made a
Mm.
huge pivot, that's, without giving away who she is, got her incredible industry recognition for what she's been doing for this big pivot in her. It's not that she changed industries altogether,
Mm.
but how she was showing up in her work and changing up the format of her work really, really just changed things.
That's incredible. Thank you.
It's like it's that we don't. Here's my jam is, I call our company powerful under pressure. We are all just being a human on the planet right now is a pressure filled experience. Can we
Yeah.
just say that? We are dealing with more interruptions and information and change in a day. I mean, I think about this. I cannot go a day without thinking about this. I'm that kind of weirdo who thinks about 100 years ago, have a phone we carried around with us everywhere. And we didn't have email. There wasn't, I don't think 100 years ago there was telephone. I think there was radio.
Mm.
But, like information didn't flow as fast, things didn't change as fast. But in those 100 years, the world has changed, but our internal operating system hasn't changed. Nobody got a faster nervous system or a different kind of brain or, and so yet we're expected to keep up. And the only way I really know to do that is to make sure that we're using our whole organism and not just our brains. We are not heads in jars. And so we need the whole entirety of head to toe, to feel the motion of our body, to stop sometimes in the day and, get up and take a walk, to literally change our view. If there's one other thing I can leave all the listeners with, it's that there are 5 things we have with us at all times in our bodies.
Mhm.
We have vision, we have inspiration, literally, like, so vision, we have our eyes and where we look, and changing our eye gaze can change our perspective, literally. We have
Mhm.
inspiration in our breathing, and how we breathe changes how we think. Like our thoughts follow the rhythm of our breath. So if we can slow our breath down, we can slow our thinking down. We have voice
Mhm.
and giving voice to what we feel, but also even just using our voice. Like sometimes I'll have a client, I'm like, what are you really feeling? Put it in your voice without words, like
Yeah.
what, using our voice on purpose. We have touch.
Mhm.
Well, it could be I put a hand on my heart and feel the solidity of I'm here right now, or a hand on my belly and do that. And then we have movement, and even tiny micro movements can change. Like if I make my posture a little taller, I raise I pull my shoulders back a little bit. We always have those 5 tools at our disposal: vision, inspiration, voice, touch, and movement. And so it's in using any of those that we can meet the moment more readily.
Amazing. Amazing. I think that's a wonderful note to end at, which is feel the power in the entirety of your body and then just listen and connect.
100%.
Susan, thank you so much for reminding us that leadership isn't about pushing harder, it's about listening deeper. Your story gives language and permission to something so many women feel but don't voice. That is, our bodies often know the truth before our minds do. To everyone listening, if you're in between that place where success doesn't feel like success anymore, take a deep breath. Maybe your body isn't betraying you. Maybe it's just trying to bring you home. I'm so grateful you joined me today, Susan. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Parul. My total pleasure.
Thank you for listening to The Courage Curve. I hope this conversation offered you perspective, comfort, or a sense of companionship as you move through your own moment of change, especially if you're choosing courage before clarity. And remember, women rise best when we rise together. Follow the show and share it with the woman who may need it.